Welcome to CineMike. For this episode, I'm going to review Kingsman: The Golden Circle, the sequel to the 2014 film Kingsman: The Secret Service, which was based upon a comic book of the same name. That first film came as a really pleasant surprise to me because I'm a huge James Bond fan and of the genre in general, so I really enjoyed all of the gags and commentary on spy films. I felt that it had a great blend of being a parody, but also having its own voice. Being partly an homage, but also fresh. It was a lot of fun, action-packed, and it was a great introduction to a potential new franchise. So I was excited when the second film was announced. This time, Eggsy and the Kingsmen must join forces with their American cousins, the Statesman, to stop an extortion plot by the world's largest and most successful drug ring, the Golden Circle. That is the simplest way that I can summarize this movie's plot because it is a bit overstuffed. I'm going to say up front that I was somewhat disappointed with this. The balance that the first film had that worked so well feels off here. It's not so much a commentary on the spy genre anymore, as it is a circus act with lots of things to look at. They go with the bigger is better approach. Over here we've got killer robot dogs. Over here we've got random big-name actors with nothing to do. Then a ton of cartoony CGI. And hey, look kids, it's Elton John! Once again, Matthew Vaughn was sitting in the director's chair. And I've enjoyed most of his films in the past. Most notably Kick-Ass and the first Kingsman, of course. His good sense of humor is layered in there still. There's some of his unique tone and cinematography, and there was some fun on a surface level. I just feel that this movie is maybe a case of being overly confident. Everyone tells you they love what you did the last time, so do it again except with more money and resources. It also felt a bit like watching a kid playing with their toys. It just feels he got maybe a little too carried away with the individual pieces and lost sight of the movie as a whole. There isn't really as much of a grounding focus this time, and it just goes on way too long. There's no reason that this had to be 141 minutes. And apparently, the original cut was like 4 hours long, and there was even talks of splitting that up into 2 films. I think that you can really feel that while you're watching this, that even though it's long, it also somehow feels condensed at the same time. I mean, you have characters that are played by big-name actors, like Michael Gambon, Halle Berry, and Channing Tatum. And they're in this so little that you wonder why they even bothered. So maybe a lot of their stuff got cut out. Well, looking at the rest of the cast, we have a bunch of the original gang returning, such as Taron Egerton back in the starring role of Eggsy. He once again does a good job carrying this movie. He brings a fun contrast to an agent with a less than gentlemanly background having to act like a gentleman. So he nails the humor that comes with that, and the physicality in the action. Solid, and he's always enjoyable to watch. Then there's Colin Firth returning as Harry, back from the dead. They come up with a very convenient way of explaining his resurrection that's borderline too ridiculous, but I guess most of the things in these movies dance on that line. Anyways, Firth was my favorite part of the first film, so of course I was happy to see him come back despite whatever explanation they came up with. The whole amnesia plot is a bit overused and a tired trope, but there was some fun that they had with it, and it did make it all the more exciting when you see him fully come back in the action near the end. Mark Strong returns as Merlin, and he's consistently great in every film he's in. He usually plays bad guys, but I find him very likable and endearing as a good guy. He's definitely one of my favorite characters in both of these movies, and I really enjoy his chemistry with Taron Egerton. Also returning is Sophie Cookson as Roxy, who was a fellow trainee alongside Eggsy who came up to be a Kingsman from the first film, but here I was pretty let down and disappointed with how they handled her character. There's not much to say. Hannah Holstrom is back as the princess for some questionable reason. She was kind of a small role in the first film, and she was really only there to set up that joke at the end of Eggsy going through her back door, if you catch my meaning. And I thought that was supposed to reflect Bond's random hookups, you know, how promiscuous he can be, and there seemed to be nothing else to it than that, just a setup for a joke. Well, now here they are, and they're in love. The coupling that I don't think anyone was asking for. I thought it was an odd choice, especially since Roxy seemed much more like the potential leading lady. Edward Holcraft is back as Charlie, who in the first film was a rival to Eggsy and was a fellow Kingsman trainee that was booted and then joined up with the bad guys by the end. Well, here he has been upgraded with a Winter Soldier-like robotic arm, and he's the main henchman of the film. In the same vein of Sofia Boutella's sword-leg henchwoman from the first film, but he's not as cool. It's kind of off to me that he's such a threat this time around because in the first film, it was sort of established that he was a bit of a wimp. Then we have a ton of new characters, most of which are pretty underdeveloped. I'll mention the most notable. Julianne Moore plays the villainous drug lord Poppy. She behaves like a sitcom mom, like if Mrs. Brady was a psychotic criminal mastermind. She's always smiling, acting polite, and wants to make sure that her guests are well fed with a home-cooked meal. You don't even want to know what she uses for meat in her burgers, though. I think that she was fine as a villain. She's certainly a good actress, but Samuel Jackson in the first movie, he was a pretty funny and entertaining villain, while Moore is a bit more bland in comparison. Also, I think her scheme is a little too much like Samuel Jackson's from the first movie in that both of them are controlling mass amounts of people. One has them aggressively trying to kill each other, while this one has them dancing and acting kind of nutty. So it feels a little too familiar. While Poppy is the main villain, there are more than one this time. And it actually gets a bit too much as far as that goes because there are essentially 3 villains. The issue is that they're all disconnected and have their own motivations and agendas. One of them being revealed at the very end, and it's just random, like, where the hell did this come from? I think they should have cut out the excess and just focused on one central villain. Cut out the subplots there. Pedro Pascal plays Whiskey, a statesman agent that likes to use a lasso that can electrify and cut the limbs from his targets. He was okay, I suppose, but again, I kind of liked Roxy as Eggsy's partner. Also, it's odd to have Tatum's character Tequila set up and then step to the side in favor of this guy. Pascal is good, but his character has some poorly motivated turns that, in the end, felt unnecessary. Jeff Bridges plays Champagne, the head of the Statesman, and he's just playing the same cowboy that he's been playing since True Grit. You know, that same character from R.I.P.D. He likes to go through phases as an actor, doesn't he? I miss his stoner phase. I mean, dude.
Hey, at least I'm housebroken.
Now, I suppose that the whole English gentleman side of the Kingsman could be considered a British stereotype, but its members all have different personalities. Like, Colin Firth is a proper gentleman, but Eggsy is rough around the edges. All the statesmen fit perfectly into that mold of the cowboy type. It made them feel a bit flat. Halle Berry is the only exception to that stereotype, but she, like a few other characters, is so underdeveloped that she's still flat. Oh, and Elton John is in this movie. Why? I have no idea. It would have been fun if it was just a brief cameo, but he's more than that. Playing himself, he is one of the heroes in this movie. Half of the time, it felt like they were cross-promoting his music or something. Let me explain part of my frustration. Now, of course, there are some exceptions, but before the finale, no sequences really stood out to me. Sure, there is some stupid fun to be found in them, but nothing you'll remember down the road. In the first film, the sequence where Harry takes on an army of churchgoers that turned into homicidal maniacs became one of my favorite action scenes in this decade. It was brutal, well choreographed, and beautifully shot. Where was that moment in this movie? Well, Eggsy and Harry's final assault on Poppy's over-the-top ruins in the jungle lair seemed like it could have been it. There's certainly moments in that sequence that started to get me pumped. But then every time I was feeling it, they would cut to Elton John doing Matrix-style jump spin kicks in his own fight sequence. Every time they cut between these 2 different fight scenes, the tension and excitement just gets sucked dry in the fight you actually want to see, and then it has to try to build itself back up again, but then, damn it, they're cutting back to Elton John again. So, we never really get an action scene on the same level as that church sequence in the first Kingsman. The CGI effects were not really all that great. They had a bit of that unnatural, cartoony feel to them. I mean, if they were used more sparingly, then it wouldn't have been too distracting. The bigger issue is how much they decide to use computer effects. There's quite a bit of them. From CGI environments to CGI robots to CGI enhanced action, it's all over the place. Considering the huge influence that the James Bond series had on this, it's too bad that Matthew Vaughn didn't adopt more of the real is better approach. There were more actors standing on green screen sets than I would have liked to have seen. Now, I'm not trying to say that the movie doesn't have moments where there's some cool practical on-set action, because of course there was some hard work put in there by the actors and the stunt team. Pushing aside these computer effects, yeah, you're going to find some good fight choreography, or some impressive stunts, or even some nice pyrotechnics. So maybe if the CGI effects were better at integrating everything, then it wouldn't have stood out so much where there was weaknesses, but Unfortunately, they just weren't up to the standards of today. I know that I've done a lot of complaining in this review, and it's not like the movie doesn't have redeemable qualities. It's just that the issues stand out as being more noticeable for me. It's most likely because I enjoyed the first film and placed expectations on this one to live up to it. Obviously, that's not easy for many sequels to do. The first one just had so many moments where I was geeking out, like the church scene, or where everyone's heads burst into fireworks to the tune of Pomp and Circumstance. This one just didn't have moments that stood out for me in the same way. I do think that this movie has some things going for it. The cast and their characters were fun to watch for the most part, and it was great to see Colin Firth again. While they went too over the top in parts of this movie, there were also times where that could be entertaining. I only got slightly bored in its length, but it did hold up for the most part. Moving on to my rating, some of you may expect me to give it a low one based on my criticisms. Well, I'm actually going to be a little generous despite the issues that I had, because there was still that entertainment factor. I still found myself enjoying parts of it. It's a movie with flaws, but it's not a bad one. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the very best that this particular film could be for me, well, I would probably give the first movie an 8.5, but I'm going to give Kingsman: The Golden Circle a 6.5, which, if you look at the rating scale that I'm using, means about average for me. Not bad, not great, but fine. And that was my review. So if you enjoyed this video, then please click like, and feel free to leave a comment below. Tell me if you agree or disagree, and I also welcome you to subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Twitter at CineMike Nerd. So anyways, until next time, this is Mike, signing off.